This video is not going to be long. There we are. Good. This video is not going to be long. I thought this was absolutely hilarious. Joe Biden is not having a good day. And I've been saying for several months now that Joe Biden is flaming out, that he is toast, especially now with this Ukrainian stuff coming up. He is going to be toast. Donald Trump has $125 million as a war chest just for the third quarter. Joe Biden is barely raising money despite all of the wealthy donors to which he's been throwing himself at. And they are going to seed the entire country with this notion that Biden is corrupt, and that whether it's true or not, the various dealings in these various in the various places will be used for fodder. Meaning, as they're shooting at Trump, they will also be shooting at Biden. Biden is toast. Look at this. This is polling out of Wisconsin. Elizabeth Warren is in the number one spot with 23%. Sanders, 17%. Biden, 9%. Biden is in single digits. Look at Gabbard. Now, all of these people talk about Warren having a surge and everything else. I have to be honest. It does seem like Gabbard is getting a bump. Now, I don't know if this is a bump just because she's going to be in the debates. And this is one of those things where maybe she can capitalize off of the energy from those debates. But at the very least in Wisconsin, she is within 3 points. Essentially a statistical tie with Joe Biden. That's astonishing. Buttigieg, Yang, Kamala Harris is at 2%. This is astonishing. Now, you can't look at this poll kind of as a thing unto itself, meaning as an end-all be-all. But from the standpoint of what it seems to be a bit of movement, it seems to be. And yeah, sad day for Joe Biden. Joe Biden, again, 9%. This doesn't look like a front runner to me. In fact, it looks like one that is, once again, flaming out. If you remember, Joe Biden has been in, several presidential races up to this point. And in all of those races, he has failed miserably. And in this particular race, in an anti-establishment year, yes, you have a lot of people who are older and looking for kind of a way back of sorts, in the sense of Joe Biden. But one of the interesting things here is right here. Warren has a strong lead among voters 50 to 64-year-old. That's Biden's age group. She's subsumed Biden's age group in this poll. Sanders among 18 to 34, meaning Sanders is maintaining his lead with the 18 and 34-year-olds. Biden has lost that. The question becomes, are the polls going to look like this continuously from state to state to state? Yes, he's still a front runner, but a far weakened one. And I strongly suspect that by the time voting gets around, not one at all. Especially with all the support that's being lavished on Elizabeth Warren. That said, this is Wisconsin. Elizabeth Warren, 23. Sanders, 17. Not bad. Joe Biden, 9. Here's one other thing. We need to see what the polling looks like from the standpoint of Sanders and the heart attack. Meaning, the news footage is trying to go with this notion that the campaign is trying to hide something and everything else. Sanders is trying to get across to people that, look, we are okay. There's nothing wrong with our campaign. Our campaign is still moving along. We're taking a break for obvious reasons. The catch becomes, what does the polling look like in the coming weeks after that? My strong suspicion is it's going to depend on the debates. On the very next debate, how does Sanders look in that debate? And I would imagine there will be somewhat of an emphasis or eyes on, especially from the standpoint of his supporters, but I would even argue from the standpoint of his enemies, in regards to how he carries himself in that debate. Is he muted? Is he slow? Does he look like a different person? All of those things are going to come up from the standpoint of the debate. Personally, I don't think anything will be wrong with Sanders. I think that stent in his heart would essentially make him probably stronger at some point after he heals than he was before. It's a campaign. And like any other race, things happen. You just have to move past it. Nevertheless, this poll went from September 29th to October 2nd. But shout out to Tulsi Gabbard. She's 3 points away from Joe Biden. That's amazing. That's amazing. And yeah, Warren, I mean, gets a bump. But of course, why wouldn't she get a bump? I mean, look at all the media attention she's been getting from CNN and MSNBC. And not just that. I mean, I can even understand to some degree the public given the opportunity for somebody else aside from somebody who was in the past election. So I don't necessarily, I don't doubt it per se, but it's more like you guys have been lavishing praise on her without necessarily having any of the criticisms. She's also had a pretty decent campaign strategy of kind of tucking herself under Sanders' wing, without necessarily having the risk associated with the way Sanders went about his own campaigns. Meaning, essentially, aping policies without necessarily having the courage to put those policies out there in the first place. Nevertheless, I'll put this at the bottom. I thought this polling is embarrassing for Joe Biden. Painfully so. Painfully embarrassing for Joe Biden. Like, share, subscribe. Look, I do consider Warren an ally. I don't have, I was, one of the things that bugged the shit out of me the other day, I exist on Twitter. Far more than I exist on Facebook, I exist on Twitter. And I organize my show in many respects using Twitter. And so I get the opportunity to see chatter and to see how people talk about various issues and all. One of the aggravating things to me was seeing people who support Sanders and people who support Tulsi at each other's throats. I didn't understand it. I still don't quite understand it. I don't quite understand why these two things clash. Fact of the matter is, I want Tulsi on the debate stage because I want her to push Sanders to the left on foreign policy. And her being on that stage opens the space. Meaning the same space that AOC walked in, that Bernie, that Tulsi, that Elizabeth Warren is living in. And that many of these lefties, for the most part, are living in. That's the space that Sanders created. Well, I want Tulsi Gabbard to create that space on this issue of foreign policy and this non-interventionist foreign policy, especially with the things that are going on around the globe. I want that on the stage. I didn't quite understand the fight. Tulsi Gabbard put out her, single-payer plus plan. Whether you support her plan or not, I don't quite understand why that means you have to attack her. And I don't quite get it either way. But look, to each their own. I don't necessarily think these two things clash. Tulsi Gabbard makes her argument, and I respect the hell out of her for putting out her own plan and not calling Medicare for what the fuck ever. And whether you support the quote-unquote single-payer plus, again, this sounds like Lone Ranger to me. Lone Ranger and Tonto, how do you have a Tonto if it's called Lone Ranger? But whether you support it or not, at the very least, she kind of put it out there that she's having something separate and distinct, as opposed to Warren, who's somewhat being dishonest in the way she's doing her healthcare thing, pretending to support Medicare for all while simultaneously saying she supports all of these other plans that are not Medicare for all. So yeah, I don't see the point in attacking one another. I think she's an ally, personally. And by the way, I want her change as a weak poster, as for Frost. That's fair. I don't make the argument that this poll is the end all be all. I think I even said as much. I take it as purely just, we have to see how the other polls go. I mean, it either cooperates it or it's an outlier. So I don't take it as end all be all. As for Frost, that's fair. Tulsi would be a good VP for Bernie, even when she disagreed with him. I don't know about VP. I don't know about VP Trudy. Like, I like her as Secretary of State, maybe. Um, I don't look. I want a perspective that gives Sanders space on that front. Meaning, I want her, or at the very least, I want the perspective in the room of this notion of we don't have to bomb that, topple that, blow that up, that we can have a foreign policy around the world that engages, that doesn't necessarily entirely have to do so militarily. And the assets that we are using in order to essentially hold the world hostage can be brought in-house for the betterment of the society itself. Turner would be a great VP, but Tulsi cuts into Trump support. Tulsi does cut into Trump support. You're right about that. Like that's a fascinating thing. She does get right-winger support. It's an odd thing, but yeah. I'm thinking about 24. She would be ready to take over if she were VP. 2024. Wow, that seems so far away, right? 4 years. 6 years. They rarely choose a running mate from the primary field. Good point, Bob. Good point. I mean, I got to be honest, though. Should Sanders choose a VP early in order to assuage any of the fears about the heart attack? That crossed my mind. But then I thought choosing a VP early will highlight the heart attack when that's not necessarily something you want to do. You want to deprioritize it, meaning if it's not an issue, why are you choosing your VP? I don't know which one is right. I assume the not choosing one is probably more right. Don't make it an issue if it's not an issue. Yeah, it might make them self-conscious. Yeah. Agreed. They usually don't pick into the convention. Yeah. Trudy, yeah. I guess I was looking at this from the standpoint of, I don't know. I had, when my mom sent me to Texas that Sanders had a heart attack, I was like, what the fuck? I was like, what? I don't know, man. It just freaked me out. Nina Turner for VP. Can't win the presidency without Ohio. Lithium 19. Interesting point. Ohio is a big state. And you can't win it without Ohio. If I'm not mistaken, Obama didn't take Ohio the second time around. But it helps. Hit flick, senility or heart attack. Which one is worse? Well, I don't think the heart attack is an issue entirely. Like, I think it's just an optics issue. Meaning it's one of those things where it's like anything else. If you had time to heal, you'll be okay. Sanders' problem is he's in the middle of a campaign, meaning the amount of time he has to heal gets a bit dodgy. And I would imagine he's going to try to push it, and I would imagine Jane is not going to want him to do that. Nicholas Locke, still watching from Vietnam. Vietnam. You know what's funny? I've been trying to get to Vietnam, man. I had to come back home earlier, but otherwise we would have been able to be there. Optics matter most. Optics does matter. Yeah, optics does matter. I mean, but the reality asserts itself sometimes, right? I mean, I strongly suspect that Sanders was pushing himself. I mean, we're talking about for the last, 4 years, a hellish pace and no slowdown per se. And maybe he didn't think he could slow down. Reality asserts itself sometimes. So, all right. Like, share. My first choice would be Jane, but that's not going to happen. I like Jane too, Trudy. I like Jane Sanders too. I think I like her because she comes across as real. As many of the other like women, like Trump's wife doesn't even seem like a person. And many of the other presidents' wives didn't really seem like people. Even Michelle Obama, to me, didn't come across as real, per se. For some reason, Jane Sanders does. I can't put my finger on it. Nina Turner, I like Nina Turner. Jesse Ventura for VP. Oh, that would not fly. That so wouldn't fly. Oh, that wouldn't fly. I don't think Jesse would fly. You know, Jesse was talking about running for as an independent. At least I've heard him talk about it. You know, I strongly suspect that Jane is probably going to try to rein him in the back end. But the catch is, you know, I don't know how much reining in you can do in this case. He's in the middle of a campaign. And whatever, I guess, look, the question becomes this. Was Sanders' heart damaged by the heart attack? Was it a situation where it weakened the muscle itself, meaning he has a harder time going forward doing the things that he was previously doing? If that's not the case, then he's stronger going forward because the stent would allow more blood to get from point A to point B. It just depends on what happens. But he, for the most part, is going to be able to dispel or reinforce depending on the debates and everything else going forward. Cornel West is awesome. Yeah, Cornel West is awesome. Yeah, Calvin, that's it. Well, Michelle Obama seemed real, but not like a next door neighbor. Yes, more like a rich. Yes, that's it. That's it. That's what it is. That's perfect. That's a perfect explanation. Well, Michelle seemed real, but not like a next door neighbor real, more like a rich lady that you bump into the mall or airport real. Agreed. That's it. Just to say he's running if Bernie bends the knee to the DNC again. Interesting. He already said it. It will be a young female, but they're all young. I'm kind of thinking Gillibrand would be a good choice. Oh, Trudy, I don't want Gillibrand. No, I don't want Gillibrand, Trudy. I don't want Gillibrand. Yeah. No. Just no. Just no. Just no. All right. On that note, I'm going to end. To each his own. Jay Paul is not too bad. It should be an interesting choice. I don't know if you want to take somebody from Congress, though. I mean, that's a seat that you got. He's going to need people like that in Congress to push him along. Trudy just trying to argue again. She's not. I knew no one would go for Gillibrand. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. All right. I'm going to end this. It's like 3:40, and there's one more that I wanted to get to before I turn in. Like, share,